We're going to talk about the 6.5 Creedmoor here this morning. The 6.5 Creedmoor, to my recollection, has been with us somewhere close to 10 years. It's a wonderfully accurate cartridge. It's become quite popular. But there's an aspect to this that there's no information on beyond a shop such as myself. From the very beginning, there's been problems with the 6.5 Creedmoor. The very first thing that came up, first time I had an order for a 6.5 Creedmoor, I quick found out that the reamer was not correct. The length of the throat was way too long on the reamer. The rifle's being built by Ruger, and that's built on a short action. That allows you, with about 30 thousandths of clearance for the bullet, a loaded round of about 2 and 820. The reamer that I purchased, to be able to get out within 20 thousandths of the rifling, the cartridge had to be loaded to 2 and 950. There's where things started, right from the very beginning. The reamer was not dimensionally correct on the length of the throat. In the process of things, I learned that there was undoubtedly somebody else making a reamer that was correct. And checking factory rifles from Ruger, those were correctly chambered with a proper length throat for the available bullets that we have. So when you have a rifle built, the only way that you can get it built by me is built correctly with the correct length throat for a loaded round of 2 and 820. I'm not saying that I wouldn't chamber a rifle with a longer throat if you wanted one on a longer action, but that is all that is possible on our shorter actions. That's not the only problem to do with the 6.5 Creedmoor. I have some of the first original brass that I bought something like 8 years ago to build some of the first rifles and check these rifles and test them for accuracy and work up loads. And it took me a few years to become aware that the brass, I'd only used a small portion of that lot of brass that I bought, that the brass was not consistent. And the inconsistent problem lies from the head to the shoulder, the dimension on the brass. That dimension has to be held consistent to do with any cartridge or brass manufacturing. I have checked. I have still some of the original brass that I bought. I have checked brass that measures as much as 7 thousandths difference from the smallest dimension to the longest dimension, checked with a Wilson cartridge gauge, case gauge. Now, if we build a rifle and we chamber it to the headspace gauge, the headspace gauge on the shortest dimension cases is basically allowing about 2 thousandths clearance with those shorter dimension cases. The cases that measure 7 thousandths longer just simply will not go in the chamber. They are too long head to shoulder. So there's a manufacturing problem. I would say that since brass out of the same box has that variation, that has come off of a machine that's got considerable play in it, and the machine needs to be rebuilt. I know something about building that type of machinery because I built it when I worked for Spear Bullet Company. When machines pick up tolerance, bullets vary, or cases vary. In this instance, cases coming off a machine. The other aspect is this brass was available from Hornady. The brass doesn't show an anneal on it. And then after a few years here, about 3-4 years ago, now brass started showing up that was annealed. Now it's quite obvious to me it's not coming from the same manufacturer. It's in a Hornady box, but it's not the brass that we got to begin with. There's something wrong. Do we have two headspace gauges out here? Headspace gauge dimensions out here? My headspace gauge I know is correct. My reamer is correct for the proper length throat. But we've got these aspects to do with the reamer and aspect to do with cases. Now this goes even further. You get a rifle, for me, buy a rifle off the shelf, the brass that you buy at the time might go right in the rifle. The next time that you go to buy brass, the brass will not fit your rifle. You buy factory ammunition. The chances are that some of the factory ammunition won't go in your rifle. Whether you had me build it or somebody else build it, or you bought it from Ruger, or who you bought it from. Because there's something going on here. And I would say that the dimensions are not being held correctly. I've built thousands of rifles for hundreds of different calibers over my lifetime, and I have never run into this great variation in cartridge cases. We buy 270s, we buy 243s, 222s, 300 Winchester, or whatever it may happen to be, and the brass, it always fits in a properly chambered rifle. This is not the case with the 6.5 Creedmoor. There are rifles from Ruger. I've got it firsthand from the people that purchased, a gun shop that purchased these rifles to sell to customers, purchased ammunition. They have the rifles there, nice looking rifles. They've got ammunition. They've got ammunition from Hornady that won't fit in the new Ruger rifles. They've got ammunition from Federal that won't fit in the new Ruger rifles. Now, this is not a good thing. You're not going to find this information out from your local gun rag. I don't know why we're not finding it out. The 6.5 Creedmoor has been written up repeatedly. You can't hardly pick up anything without very frequently reading something on 6.5 Creedmoor and how it's such a wonderful cartridge. It's a problem. It's a very, very big problem. How would you like to buy a rifle to find that the ammunition of the brass you have won't go in it? Purchase a rifle from me, have me build your rifle. It's built correctly. You go to your local gun store or whatever source you can get your brass or your cartridge cases from, and won't go in the rifle. The first thing you do, you're on the phone trying to lay the blame on me or whoever else built it for you. This isn't where the finger needs to be pointed. The finger needs to be pointed right at the manufacturers of this brass and this ammunition. I think that's where the problem is. And aside from the fact there's reamers out here that are not correct. You're going to be an unhappy camper if you're a precision hand loader and you understand the relationship of a bullet seated near or close to the rifling, and if you've got to jump a bullet 150, 180 thousandths, what did I go to a custom rifle maker for to have a rifle done that way? Well, you're not going to get it done that way here because it's going to be chambered correctly. But I cannot build a rifle for you and guarantee that these manufacturers, brass and or ammunition, from lot to lot to lot to lot over years and years and years here, that this has been in place, that it's going to work. So you need to be very, very aware that it's a problem. And if you pick up brass, you've used it, and now you need to replace it, the very strong chance is that the new brass that you buy is not going to fit your rifle. I have had no chance to check absolutely everybody's brass. There's a lot of cartridge brass out here now for 6.5 Creedmoor. Winchester, Federal, Hornady. There's numerous other manufacturers of the brass. the best of my knowledge, the Hornady brass is not made by Hornady, it's made by Norma. But yet at the same time, there's a big question, because some of the brass that you get in the box, one time it'll have a annealed shoulder neck area, and the next time it won't. It'll be just clean, tumbled brass, boxed up and sold to you. Well, it's very obvious to me it's not the same brass, it's from another manufacturer. The main people that you buy brass from that's very, very high quality is Lapua. Lapua brass always has an annealed neck area. Is that brass that shows the anneal on it at 6.5 Creedmoor, is that actually Lapua brass with a Hornady head stamp? Good question. What's the big secret? Can't we tell the truth? If you're not making the brass, tell us who's making the brass, so we know where it's coming from, so we can get to the bottom of these things. And you know, this is not an easy thing. And it's obviously, there's got to be some recoil ammunition. There's probably recall of rifles, because if you buy a rifle and the ammunition won't fit, maybe somebody else's brand will fit, but the brand or two that you picked up to try in your rifle to see what shoots the best, say that you're not a hand loader, you pick up factory ammunition, you're kind of sunk. You're kind of sunk, because here you are, and then you got to go the route to try to straighten these problems out. This is not something that we should have to be doing, and I would like, you know, very much for people to pay attention to what I'm talking about here, and if they've got an idea of having a 6.5 Creedmoor, because it's repeatedly cropping up all across the country. I have the opportunity to visit with folks all around the country, building rifles for, and various acquaintances and one thing and another, and people of various abilities, various aptitudes, whether they're just a factory ammunition, you know, shooter, or whether they're, you know, a novice reloader, or really a somewhat experienced hand loader. It's happening from all aspects. So anyway, you should be aware of this.